Have you ever noticed that the more you try to simplify your life, the more pressure comes from all sides? The more you refuse unnecessary complication, the more they call you complacent, outdated, someone who doesn't keep up with progress. There's something about authentic simplicity that deeply disturbs power structures. And it's not about being ignorant or lazy, it's about living directly, without elaborate masks, without depending on complex systems to validate your existence. It's about having clarity about what really matters while everyone else drowns in sophisticated futilities. It's about refusing the entire game while others fight for position within it. And maybe you've already felt this yourself. The man who lives simply when awakened to this force is something that no control can completely tame. Because he's not playing the game, he left the arena. And whoever is outside the arena cannot be defeated by the rules inside. The first point is clarity immune to manipulation. The simple man sees the world directly, without conceptual intermediaries. Family needs to eat, so he works. House needs repair, so he fixes it. Child needs guidance, so he guides. There aren't layers upon layers of complex theories between him and concrete reality. This works as natural protection against the main modern control tool, programmed confusion. While millions debate definitions that change every week, trying to understand which opinion is allowed today, which behavior is acceptable now, he simply lives according to what he knows to be true. He doesn't enter the maze because he noticed something fundamental. The maze was made to trap you, not to free you, to make you walk in circles debating infinite nuances while your life passes by. Think about the energy wasted trying to keep up with social rules that constantly transform. What was acceptable yesterday is problematic today. The word you used your whole life without malice has now become a serious offense. The behavior praised last week now puts you at risk. There's no consistent logic, just perpetual movement that ends up working as constant control. And constant insecurity generates automatic obedience. A person insecure about their own perceptions asks for external guidance for everything, for how to think, how to speak, how to act, becomes a puppet dancing as the music changes. The simple man doesn't play this exhausting game, not because he's a conscious rebel, but because his basic instinct recognizes manipulation when he sees it. He trusts what has worked for generations. Direct honesty, work that generates concrete results, genuine care for his own. Simple as that. And precisely because it's simple, because it doesn't have layers of sophistication to deconstruct, it's deeply subversive. His simplicity is natural immunization against sophisticated absurdities. You don't need to vaccinate someone who already has a strong immune system developed through generations of exposure to concrete reality. And the simple man developed antibodies against elaborate nonsense simply by never having wasted time with it, by never having let himself be seduced by artificial complexity that doesn't generate real results. While the educated urban class debates for hours about concepts that change meaning every week, creating categories within subcategories that nobody can really keep up with, he's doing concrete things that transform the material world around him, building a wall that will last decades, planting a garden that will feed the family, teaching his son to fish, transmitting knowledge that will cross generations. These actions aren't ideology, they're tangible reality that you can touch, see, feel, measure. You don't deconstruct a solid wall with a sophisticated postmodern argument. You don't plant real food with critical theory published in an academic journal. And the more society moves away from the concrete to the abstract, the more the simple man becomes indispensable and dangerous at the same time. Because when the food really runs out, when the energy completely fails, when the complex and fragile system enters irreversible collapse, who will survive and thrive? Whoever knows how to do real things with their own hands. Whoever never lost contact with the material basis of existence. And this practical knowledge, this competence tested daily in concrete reality, is genuine power that no diploma hanging on the wall can deliver or replace. The second aspect is the natural refusal of consumption as identity. the modern economic system viscerally depends on you being permanently dissatisfied, always wanting more, newer, more visible status. You work at a job you hate to buy things you don't need, to impress people who barely know you and don't really care. It's an infinite cycle, a sophisticated hamster wheel, fueled by your chronic unhappiness, transformed into economic fuel. The simple man exits this cycle without fanfare, without noisy anti-capitalist militancy. He just lives differently, fixes instead of replacing, uses until it really runs out, doesn't show off because he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. And in this process, he discovers something revolutionary that the system doesn't want you to know. Genuine happiness has no market price. A Sunday barbecue with decades-old friends is infinitely more valuable than an expensive dinner at a starred restaurant that you barely enjoyed because you were worried about taking a photo to post. A child playing barefoot in the backyard, laughing at something silly, completely surpasses an expensive international trip you took half-stressed, half-worried about the likes the photo would get. This self-sufficient happiness, this satisfaction that springs from simple and free things, destroys the fundamental logic of compulsive consumption. Because if you're genuinely satisfied with the basics, you don't buy the expensive illusion they're always trying to sell. Modern marketing doesn't sell products. It sells permanent dissatisfaction. Each ad implicitly tells you that you're not good enough the way you are, that something essential is missing, that your life would be better, more complete, happier with this object, this experience, this service. It's extremely sophisticated psychological warfare, disguised as innocent commercial communication. And it works frighteningly well. So much so that intelligent people work 40, 50 hours a week at jobs that emotionally destroy them, just to have money to buy things they don't really need, to maintain an appearance that doesn't really matter, to impress people who really don't care. The simple man sees this madness from outside and simply doesn't participate, not because of some complex alternative economic theory, just because his basic sense of purpose and fulfillment isn't connected with accumulation and ostentation of objects. He measures success in a radically different way. Healthy and united family, well-done work that serves others and generates visible results, strong community where everyone helps each other mutually, inner peace that allows sleeping peacefully at night. None of these things are bought with money, no matter how much you have. None are shown off on Instagram in a way that generates real validation. And precisely because they can't be bought or shown off, they're an existential threat to the entire economic model built on top of your vanity, your permanent insecurity, and your existential emptiness that you try to fill with consumption. Imagine 10 million people waking up tomorrow and sincerely deciding they have enough to be happy, that they don't need constant upgrades just because a new model launched, a new model every year just because marketing says they need it, a more expensive and exclusive experience to validate their existence and prove their own worth. Think about the economic chaos that would cause. It's not collapse because people are suffering or experiencing real need. It's collapse because they're genuinely well, satisfied, fulfilled, with less than the system says they need. It's the most perverse and hidden contradiction of the current economic system. It functions on top of your emotional misery, carefully disguised as legitimate aspiration and healthy pursuit of excellence. You have to be always unhappy enough to keep consuming compulsively, but not so unhappy that you give up completely and exit the game for good. It's a delicate calibration of functional suffering that keeps the engine running. The simple man exposes this existential fraud simply by living satisfied with less. And by exposing through lived example, he shows a real alternative path for those who are exhausted, burned out, drained from chasing goals that never, ever bring the inner peace promised by the ads. The third point is the family as an autonomous cell of resistance. The extended family always functioned as a basic autonomous unit of cultural and social reproduction. When someone got sick, family took care without needing to outsource everything. When someone needed help with work, family showed up. When a child needed to learn something essential, family taught. Didn't need the state, corporation, app, Paid service intermediating and monetizing every aspect of basic human life. Now stop and look around. Look at the model they pushed as inevitable progress. Tiny nuclear families isolated in small apartments. Zero real support network. Grandparents in nursing homes because there's no space or time. Uncles and cousins scattered across different states. See each other once a year, if that. Any small crisis becomes an immense and expensive drama because there's absolutely nobody close to really help. You depend on paid service for literally everything. Daycare for the children, private school to educate, psychologist to deal with feelings, delivery person for food, housekeeper to clean, personal trainer for exercise. Each basic function that used to naturally belong to the extended family became a commodity, became a product you buy monthly. And each of these commodities makes you more dependent on the system, more controllable, more fragile, more vulnerable. If the money runs out, your entire life collapses because you outsourced everything. The simple man keeps the extended family functioning as a living organism, not because he read a sociology book about social capital. Because it's natural, it's obvious, it's how it's always been. Uncles, cousins, grandparents, all living nearby, or at least maintaining real constant contact. This family network is a fortress that the system can't completely penetrate, can't totally monitor, can't control in depth. It's where true values are transmitted without institutional filter, without ethics committee approval, without external expert validation, where children learn by watching elders work, seeing problems being solved, seeing things being fixed. Organic learning by generational osmosis. And precisely because of that, it's a threat. I'm not romanticizing or denying real problems that exist and always existed. Family has enormous flaws, terrible conflicts, dynamics that can be suffocating, controlling, deeply limiting in various aspects of individual life. Any honest person who grew up in a family knows this. But a strong family, even with all its inherent and inevitable flaws, is still a fundamental barrier against complete and devastating social atomization. It's where you learn viscerally, not through books but through daily lived experience, that there's something infinitely greater than yourself, greater than your immediate individual comfort, greater than your momentary will. Where sacrifice isn't cold and impersonal legal obligation imposed by a distant court, but concrete love, lived day to day through 1,000 small daily decisions and renunciations that nobody sees or applauds. Where you see a real, tangible example of lasting commitment, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. The simple man protects this structure instinctively, without theorizing too much about social capital, about support structures, about cultural reproduction. He simply knows, at the most basic and visceral level, that family is all that remains when everything else fails. And by protecting and keeping this nucleus alive, he teaches his children through concrete example, not through abstract discourse, to do exactly the same when it's their turn. It's cultural resistance that multiplies across entire generations, completely invisible and incomprehensible to those who can only see isolated individual atomized consumers floating in the market without roots or anchors. The fourth aspect is practical competence that generates real, tangible, testable independence, not just discursive or performative. Do you know how to change a flat tire on the road alone without needing to call roadside assistance? Do you know how to fix a leaking faucet without calling a plumber who'll charge an absurd amount for 15 minutes of work? Do you know how to plant something minimally edible that can feed you and your family in case of need? Do you know how to cook a basic, decent and nutritious meal without eternally resorting to expensive delivery or ultra-processed food that slowly kills you? The vast majority of people today, especially in big cities, no longer know how to do these simple things that were common knowledge just 2 generations ago. Outsourced absolutely every basic practical task, and each fundamental skill outsourced is a concrete piece of real autonomy that you lost probably without even realizing the gravity of what you were giving up. Past generations, your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, knew how to do literally hundreds of essential practical things with their own hands. Not because they were geniuses with superior intelligence or exceptional IQ, but because they had to learn these skills in practice out of absolute survival necessity. Nobody was going to do it for them, because a system of outsourced services simply didn't exist on this scale. Either you learned or you went without, simple as that. Today, if the app goes down for a few hours, if the delivery system stops for a day, half the urban population can't even make their own basic dinner without entering existential crisis and real panic. The simple man keeps practical knowledge alive, knows how to build, fix, plant, create. This is real power, not abstract power of likes on social media. Concrete power of not depending on a fragile system that can collapse at any moment. He doesn't need a supermarket to eat if he has land. Doesn't need an expensive technician to fix a tool. Doesn't need a mediator to solve a neighbor's problem. This self-sufficiency is pure subversion of the modern project, because the project was always to create total dependence. They want you to need them for absolutely everything. Food through industrial chains you don't control. Water through centralized systems. Energy through complex and fragile networks. Information through monitored channels. Entertainment through platforms that model behavior. A man who knows how to do basic and essential things partially escapes this invisible but absolutely real prison. And when millions of men escape simultaneously, even if only partially, total and omnipresent control becomes logistically and mathematically impossible to sustain long term. That's precisely why they systematically devalued manual work in recent decades through powerful cultural narratives, ridiculed practical knowledge calling it backwards people's stuff, pushed everyone to university even when it didn't make sense for the person. It wasn't just about education or human development. This ended up creating entire generations of people highly educated on paper, with expensive diplomas hanging on the wall, but completely incompetent in basic survival and practical autonomy skills. People who know how to debate postmodern theory in 3 languages, but don't know how to change a light bulb. Who understand extremely sophisticated abstract concepts, but enter genuine panic when the internet goes down. Who have master's and doctoral degrees but can't plant a simple head of lettuce. This is the ideal population for maximum control. Intelligent enough to be economically productive, but too dependent on complex systems to be truly free. The 5th point is resistance to fabricated and amplified fear. When the pandemic came, who entered total panic? Urban classes accustomed to absolute control and comfortable predictability. Who kept working, keeping the entire structure functioning? Essential workers, the simple man. He didn't enter hysteria because he's already lived through real difficulty in life, already experienced real hunger, already saw illness up close taking people he loved, already overcame crises without government running his daily life like he's a child. This lived resilience, this courage tested in practice, creates psychological armor that sophisticated propaganda can't easily destroy. Fear is the oldest political tool that exists, always has been. But the modern version is industrial, scientifically calibrated, applied with precision through all channels simultaneously. You wake up. First thing is alarming news. Phone vibrates with more alarm. Turn on TV. An expert is there saying the situation is extremely serious. Open social media. Everyone is sharing panic. There's no escape, no respite. It's psychological bombardment 24 hours a day that ends up functioning as a control mechanism. It works on most people because they've never experienced real danger in life, never developed internal calibration of true threat versus theater. The simple man developed this calibration through experience. He differentiates well-produced theater from immediate concrete danger, knows viscerally that media always exaggerates to hold attention, knows that crises announced with fanfare are rarely as serious as they promise. This rare capacity to stay calm and think clearly while everyone around goes crazy is immense and strategic power. A genuinely terrified person accepts literally any order, any absurd restriction, any invasion of privacy if they promise a little security. A person who's already gone through the worst life can offer, and came out alive on the other side, doesn't bend so easily. They question, resist, assess rationally, silently, without making public speeches, but resist. And when millions do this simultaneously without central coordination, social control based exclusively on fabricated fear simply doesn't work anymore. Loses effectiveness, breaks. The sixth aspect is the word that's worth more than any signed contract. In smaller communities, a given word still has real weight. A handshake still means something. A man of his word builds a reputation over decades that's worth more than any legal document. In a world where everyone systematically lies all the time, where contracts are broken as soon as they become inconvenient, where promises made today mean absolutely nothing tomorrow, someone whose word has real weight exposes the complete rot of the system by pure contrast. Honor was currency before money even existed as a concept. It was what allowed commerce between tribes, cooperation between groups, collective construction of something greater. You trusted the transaction because the other side genuinely valued their own word, their own reputation. Breaking your word was destroying the only capital you had, your honor. This ancestral system worked perfectly for thousands of years. It only started crumbling when societies became too large, too anonymous, when you started dealing mainly with strangers you'd never see again. Then honor became ridiculed naivete. Cleverness became virtue. Lying well became professional competence. The simple man, however, still lives at a scale where reputation matters concretely, where stories pass, where doing the wrong thing has immediate and lasting social consequence. And in these smaller and more human spaces, honor regains tremendous value, becomes the foundation of everything that works. This network of genuine trust based on shared honor is completely invisible to modern surveillance and control systems. They can track digitally signed contracts, can hack messages on phones, can monitor financial transactions at banks, but they can't map, penetrate, or effectively control men who simply trust each other based on decades of shared history of maintained personal honor. It's deeply distributed, organic resistance, impossible to completely map without being inside the community, and precisely because of that, deeply frightening to those who depend on total centralized control. The seventh point is organic union that dispenses with formal hierarchical structure. When the simple man decides to unite with other equals, he doesn't need a political party with a 50-page statute, a printed revolutionary manifesto, or a charismatic leader commanding from the top of the pyramid. He unites naturally through real bonds tested by time, extended family that's known each other for generations, neighborhood where everyone knows each other by name, friends who trust each other because they've already gone through difficulties together and proved loyalty in practice. This union based on real human relationships, not abstract ideology, is infinitely more dangerous than any formally organized social movement with visible hierarchy, because there's no visible head to cut or buy, no bureaucratic structure to infiltrate with agents, no written ideology you can deconstruct or intellectually refute. It's simply a complex web of genuine relationships acting in surprisingly coordinated fashion without needing explicit central coordination or top-down orders. This organic union acts silently. Nobody announces anything. But when something threatens the community, everyone simply doesn't cooperate. Not by order from above, but by shared tacit understanding. Organized movements are easy to neutralize. You buy off a leader, threaten another, arrest the resistors, plant internal division. Eventually the movement self-destructs or is co-opted. But how do you neutralize 1,000 small communities acting independently, without central leadership, just through shared values and mutual trust built over years? You don't neutralize it. It's resistance that grows the more you squeeze. Because it's not maintained by abstract ideology. It's maintained by real bonds of blood, sweat, and history lived together. The eighth aspect is visceral faith that anchors meaning. The simple man has faith. Could be in God, could be an ancient moral order, could be in something greater he doesn't know how to name properly. His faith isn't academic, isn't for debate, isn't to impress. It's what sustains him when everything fails. It's the foundation that gives meaning to the struggle. And a genuine, lived faith in millions of simple men is something modern narratives can't shake. Because it's not an intellectual construction you deconstruct with an argument. It's lived experience you feel in your bones. This faith creates men who don't give up in the face of adversity, who don't despair when everything seems lost, who go through hell and come out the other side still standing. The modern world tries to sell sophisticated nihilism. Everything is social construction. Nothing has real meaning. Values are arbitrary. Live however you want. Seems liberating, but it's a subtle prison. Because without foundation, without greater purpose, any serious difficulty breaks you. You have no reason to fight, no reason to sacrifice, no reason to resist. The simple man does. His faith, even if he doesn't know how to articulate it philosophically, gives him reason to continue when logic would say to give up. And men with a transcendent reason to continue are invincible. Not because they can't be physically killed, but because they can't be psychologically broken, can't be demoralized, can't be convinced that everything is useless. This spiritual resilience, this anchor in something greater than themselves, is what allows lasting resistance. It's what allows true sacrifice. It's what allows looking at the worst possible scenario and saying, even so, I continue. The ninth point is silence that acts. While everyone screams on social media, debates on programs, writes long manifestos, the simple man stays quiet and doesn't announce revolution, just lives differently. And this silent difference, multiplied by millions, is real change. You don't see it coming because there's no hashtag, no protest, no leader giving interviews. It's simply people deciding to live another way. And when you notice, everything's already changed. This collective silence scares more than a noisy demonstration. Because you see a demonstration, you map it, you know who the leaders are, what they want, how to negotiate or neutralize. Silence you don't see. Don't know how many have already decided not to cooperate anymore. How many stopped believing official narratives? How many are creating parallel systems, informal economies, support networks outside institutional control? You only find out when it's too late, when you realize the institutions became empty shells, that real power silently migrated somewhere else. The 10th and final aspect is inevitable multiplication. You can buy some simple men, can corrupt others, can even eliminate the most dangerous ones, but never all of them, because it's not indoctrination that gets reprogrammed. It's human nature responding to excessive artificiality. The more the world becomes false, complicated, distant from concrete reality, the more people awaken to simplicity. It's natural law. Excess complexity always generates a return movement to the essential. You educate an entire generation in specific schools, bombard 100 million with constant propaganda, censor different voices, create a climate of fear, but you can't prevent men from realizing their lives became empty, that they traded real meaning for promises that were never fulfilled. When this perception happens, there's no going back. The man who awakens to his own simplicity doesn't return to illusion. He can pretend out of prudence, but inside he's already free. And each free man contaminates others around him. The family sees, friends notice, children learn. It's exponential multiplication that external force doesn't stop. That's why they desperately try to keep you confused, busy, divided, indebted, scared. Because they know that you stopped, in silence, truly thinking about your own life, is the beginning of the end for them. The simple man isn't a threat because he has weapons or resources. He's a threat because he represents authenticity. And in a world of total lies, authenticity is an unstoppable force. One authentic man is worth more than 1,000 shouting empty slogans. 10,000 authentic men living in an integrated way are a more powerful revolution than any party. 1 million of them, spread silently, acting without needing central orders, is the end of all artificial control.